God bless everyone. We're still on the teaching series of denominations, and we're looking at congregational type of government. We talked about there was three: Episcopal, Presbyterian, and congregational, and we're looking at congregational. And we left off, or we just started, we're going to look at why within the congregational structure, some have one pastor or elder that leads, and they have their ideas mainly taken from like the Old Testament and New Testament, people like Moses, the judges, Peter, James, the brother of Jesus, as one person, a single elder or leader. And we also have the early church in Antioch. There's John and Sophia and Constantinople, Augustine in Hippo, and Jonathan Edwards in Northampton. Also, the idea of the synagogues in the churches, going back to the Jewish around Jesus' time, they used to have synagogues, and there was a president of the synagogue. So these are points for those who have one pastor idea of leading. Now, in terms of the one person, there's some issues in terms of accountability, and he has to have good balance and checks, accountability and transparency, dealing with administration of the funds, administration of all the day-to-day activities. And several different denominations use this format. Now, there's the democratic congregation. It is led by a democratically elected leadership, board, or council. And the final authority for all decisions and doctrinal determinations are really vested in a plurality in terms of many people making the decision, the leaders, which are selected by the congregation through voting in terms of congregation. That's where the name congregations comes from, in terms of the congregation has a democratic voice in voting the leaders, both in terms of the committees and the boards and the pastor himself. In some places they call them the elders. And so we talked about a little bit later, some have boards that deal with administrative boards, and some elders or boards that deal with spiritual matters, and actually are the ones that are closer to the pastor and making the decisions in terms of doctrinal decisions or important decisions, spiritual decisions the church is going through. Now, there's in some congregations they have deacons that they help out the ministers. So that's from a single. So congregations can have a single leader, and they also could have a plural elder-led congregation where there's decisions being made by more than one elders in the church. So that's, in a nutshell, what congregational type of government is. And so if you can just summarize it, it basically means that the congregation plays a more democratic role in terms of voting in the leadership or even the pastor and the decisions that are made day to day. Now, we have the Presbyterian type of government, and mainly seen in Presbyterian and Reformed churches. And it's really an elder run or presbyter run, which is just another name but for a minister or pastor. And basically that there's a lot of elders, but there's the one elder, which is the main pastor, and typically they're elected by the congregation for a certain time, terms, like let's say 3 years or 5 years, or whatever the congregation sets, or they do lots in terms of voting. And so there's a leader that does the main things in terms of this, the preaching and the teaching. And there's usually the meetings of the district are called a synod, where everyone meets from different congregations. They send their leaders, and they make a big decision in terms of doctrinal decisions as a denomination. So that's basically the Presbyterian type of church government. Now we have the last one, which is Episcopal. And it comes from the word episkopa, which is derived from the Greek word episkopos, which means overseer. And the New Testament talks about overseers. Some people use bishop. And this type of government is, well, the Roman Catholic Church has it. The Anglican Church, this type, usually have the titles bishop in terms of the government. And yeah, the Anglican Church of England. And it's basically there's leaders from the top down that running the changes and the enforcing of the doctrinal statements and the teaching and the preaching of the church. Now, there's a couple of things that the Bible actually teaches us in terms of what's the biblical pattern. They're a key. In the Bible, there is no distinction between elders and bishops. Both Titus 1:5-7 and Acts 20:17 and 28 intermingle in terms of they represent the same office, elders and bishop. And each congregation and a center of leadership is to have plurality of elders. We see that in Acts 14:23, 20:17, and Philippians 1:1. And it wasn't a one-man run. These elders have oversight of the church. We see that in Acts 20:28, 1 Peter 5:2-3. And so they're responsible for the running the congregation. We see that in 1 Timothy 3:5, 5:17, 1 Thessalonians 5:12, Hebrews 13:7, 17, and 24. The leaders, they're supposed to judge among the brothers. 1 Corinthians 6:5, and they do the rebuking, the leaders. 1 Timothy 5:20, and like we read in Matthew 16, they have the keys of the kingdom in terms of to bind and to loose. Matthew 16:19, 18, and John 20 and to 23. And they're for preaching, keys of preaching the gospel. 1 John 1:3, administering the sacraments. Matthew 28:19-20, 1 Corinthians 11, and the exercise of discipline. Matthew 18:17, 1 Corinthians 5:1-5. And the biblical, you'll find the term deacons in the Bible. And they were the ones who gave service. And the first time we see of that, actually in Acts 6, when there was the need to elect and call 7 deacons. One of them was Stephen, who was the first Christian martyr. And the second person to die, it was obviously Jesus, the first one, and then Stephen was the second person and the first Christian to die. And he was a deacon. So they were appointed to help in administration and serve ministry of mercy. We have Philippians 1:1, Acts 6:1-6, 1 Timothy 3:8-13. We see that the office bearers in the church are nominated by the members of the congregation in Acts 6:5-6. However, they have to pass to a process. They have to examine, they have to check their fruit, and there has to be they have to confirm their testimony, see what their life is in terms of the secular, in terms of their family, in terms of what they believe in. And there's a board of elders, Acts 6:6, Acts 13:1-3, 1 Timothy 4-14. And of course, we have Acts 15, which deals with members have a right to bring up issues and to have it determined as a whole, as a denomination. So what is your point of view? What is your belief on this? What is your stand? What is your positional statement on these things? And in that time, in Acts 15, there was about circumcision, and there was also disagreement between the issue of Paul bringing on John Mark and Barnabas, and wanting to bring him, and Paul not. And so, anyways, that's secondary. And so we see that in Acts. There's another thing we have to understand. We'll look at it in the next video.